I asked her when the wedding was and she said, "We got married yesterday." The words felt like a storm hitting out of nowhere. My heart stopped for a second. I stared at her, trying to understand what she just said. Yesterday? Married? To my son? Without anyone knowing? Without me there? The world around me went quiet. I could not even find words to respond. My mind raced through memories, through every conversation we had, through every moment I thought we were close. How could something so big happen without a single word to me? I could see the happiness on her face, but inside me, there was a deep ache that I could not hide. I forced a small smile, pretending to be fine, but my chest felt tight. My son's wedding had always been something I imagined as a family celebration. I had dreamed of being there, helping with preparations, blessing the couple, taking photos with tears in my eyes. But now all I had was this one shocking sentence. The silence between us grew heavy. I tried to speak but stopped myself. I could feel something breaking inside me, something I did not know how to fix. My phone rang just as I was finishing my morning tea. It was my son's fiancée. I smiled when I saw her name on the screen because we had been talking almost every day about the wedding. I thought maybe she wanted to discuss the dress fitting or the guest list. I answered with a cheerful voice, ready to ask how the plans were going. But her tone caught me off guard. She sounded unusually bright, almost too excited. Before I could say much, she laughed and said, "Oh, we already got married yesterday." For a moment, I did not even understand what she meant. I froze, the cup still in my hand, my mind refusing to believe what I just heard. I waited for her to say it was a joke, but she did not. She sounded calm, happy, and completely serious. The room suddenly felt smaller. I could hear my own breathing. I tried to speak, but my voice broke before any words came out. She kept talking about how simple and perfect the ceremony was, how they decided to do it quietly, just the two of them. I barely listened. All I could think was, yesterday? Married? Without me. My heart started pounding. I looked around the living room. There were wedding decorations stacked in the corner, still in their boxes. I had been planning everything for weeks. I had bought gifts for her family. I had even called relatives to ask them to save the date. Every little thing I had done suddenly felt meaningless. In my head, I could see the pictures of what I thought her wedding day would look like. The music, the lights, the joy of seeing my son standing proudly beside her. But instead, it was just silence on my end and a cheerful voice on the other side of the phone. When she finished speaking, there was a long pause. I did not know what to say. My throat felt dry and my hands were shaking. Finally, I said softly, "So you got married yesterday?" She said yes, sounding proud and content. I tried to smile, though she could not see it. I forced out a quiet congratulations before ending the call. I sat there for a long time, staring at the cup of tea that had gone cold. The house was completely still. I whispered to myself, I was not even on the guest list. 3 years ago, everything was different. My son had just lost his job and he looked completely lost. He came home one evening, shoulders slumped, eyes tired, and said he could not keep up with the bills anymore. I told him to come back and stay with me until things got better. No matter how old he got, in my heart he was still my boy. He moved in a few days later with his girlfriend. She was polite, always saying thank you and offering to help around the house. I wanted to make her feel welcome because I knew how hard it must have been for both of them. They were young, trying to figure out life together, and I thought a little support could make a big difference. At first, it was nice having them home. I would cook their favorite meals, make tea in the evenings, and sit with them while we talked about their plans. My son kept saying it was just temporary, that he would find a job soon. I believed him because he had always been determined. Months passed and money got tighter. So I started helping more. I paid the rent for their small apartment once they decided to move out. I wanted them to have their own space. I even bought them groceries every month so they could save some money. Sometimes I would surprise them with things for their kitchen or small decorations. I remember buying new curtains and spending the afternoon hanging them myself while they both laughed at how picky I was about the color. It felt good to help. I thought I was doing what any mother would do. Every time my son said, "Thank you, Mom," I felt proud. I did not care about the cost or the effort. What mattered to me was seeing him stable again, smiling again. There were days when I would worry that maybe I was doing too much. But then I would see them laughing together, planning their future, and all those doubts faded. They talked about saving for their own home, about getting married one day, and I was excited. I dreamed of helping them plan everything. I even started collecting ideas for the wedding, small things like floral themes and table settings. I thought it would be our family's next happy chapter. Sometimes I would stay up late thinking about how much had changed. My little boy had grown into a man with someone who cared for him. And even though it was not always easy, I felt blessed to still be part of his life in a meaningful way. I told myself that every bit of sacrifice would be worth it in the end. I just wanted him to be happy. Stories like this move you? Take a second to subscribe. Your support helps us share more true stories like this one. After the call ended, I sat in silence staring at my phone. I told myself there had to be some mistake. Maybe she said it wrong. Maybe it was some small ceremony or a misunderstanding. I opened social media hoping to see nothing, hoping to prove myself wrong. But the very first post that appeared made my heart stop. It was a photo of my son standing beside her in a white dress. He was smiling, looking happier than I had seen him in years. The caption read, "Perfect day." There were hearts, comments from friends saying congratulations, and dozens of likes. I scrolled down, my hands trembling as more pictures loaded. There they were, holding hands, cutting a cake, posing under a small floral arch. Each picture felt like a knife twisting deeper. Not a single one included me or any of our family. There was no mention of us, no sign that we were ever supposed to be part of that moment. I could not believe what I was seeing. Just 2 days ago we had been talking about future plans, about the big wedding they wanted. Now it was already over. I kept staring at his face, trying to understand how he could hide something like this. I remembered all the times he said, "Do not worry, Mom, you will be the first to know when we decide." I trusted that. I believed him. I had no reason not to. Yet here I was, finding out from a photo, like a stranger looking at someone else's life. I felt the tears coming, but I did not cry right away. My body felt heavy, like I was frozen in place. It was not just sadness, it was disbelief. The thought that my son had taken such an important step without even telling me made me feel invisible. I kept scrolling until I reached a picture of them holding their marriage certificate, smiling proudly. That was the moment everything hit me all at once. The shock turned into something deeper, something that felt like heartbreak. They did not even tell me they were planning it. They just did it like I did not exist. I put my phone down and sat there in silence. My heart ached, but my mind was completely blank. I wanted to be angry, but all I could feel was pain. I sat at the dining table that night, staring at the empty chair across from me. The food on my plate had gone cold, but I did not have the heart to move it. The silence in the house felt louder than ever. For years, I had imagined this table filled with laughter, with my son and his wife talking about their day. But now all I had was the sound of my own thoughts. I kept repeating the same words in my mind. I was not just forgotten. I was erased. It felt like someone had taken a part of my life and painted over it, pretending it never existed. Every memory that used to bring me comfort now felt like a reminder of how invisible I had become. I thought about the time I helped him buy his first car. He was so excited, his hands shaking as he held the keys. I told him to drive carefully and he hugged me, promising that he would. I thought about the nights I stayed up waiting for him to come home from college, worried every time the clock passed midnight. I would keep the light on until I heard his footsteps at the door. There were so many small things no one ever sees. The school lunches I packed, the birthday cakes I baked, the money I quietly sent when he said he was fine but I knew he was struggling. I was always there even when he did not ask. That was what being a mother meant to me. Now I looked at the same hands that had done all of that. They felt empty. My home felt smaller, my world quieter. I tried to understand what changed. Maybe I was too involved. Maybe I made things too easy. I had always wanted to take away his pain, to make life smooth for him. But in doing that, maybe I taught him that I would always be there no matter how little he included me. I looked around the room and saw pieces of him everywhere. The old trophies from his school competitions, his childhood photos still hanging on the wall, the blanket he used to wrap himself in when he watched movies on the couch. Each one whispered the same question. How did we get here? Part of me wanted to believe this was just a mistake, that he would call tomorrow and try to explain. But deep down I knew it was more than that. This was not about a missed phone call or a forgotten invitation. This was a quiet choice. A decision to build a life that no longer had a place for me in it. I sat back and closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. Maybe I made loving them too easy. She sits at the edge of her bed, her hands resting on a folder of receipts and transfer slips. Every month for years she had sent money without a second thought. It was her way of helping, her way of staying connected. But this month feels different. The thought of that wedding photo, the smiles, the captions still burns quietly inside her. It is not anger anymore. It is a calm kind of truth. At the bank, she stands in line with a steady expression. There is no hesitation in her eyes now. When the teller greets her, she smiles politely and hands over her account book. "I would like to stop the monthly transfer," she says. Her voice is soft but clear, the kind that carries certainty without the need to be loud. The teller nods and types something on the screen. It is a short moment, yet it feels like the closing of a long chapter. As she walks out, she feels a strange lightness in her chest. The air outside feels new. She takes a deep breath, noticing things she had not in a long time: the sound of the wind, the warmth of the sun on her face. It is as if she has finally stepped back into her own life. For years her world revolved around others. Their needs, their dreams, their plans. But for the first time she is thinking about herself, and it does not feel selfish. Feels right. That evening she sits by the window with a cup of tea. The house is quiet, but the silence feels peaceful now. She looks at her phone, at the old chat threads, at the messages that were once filled with love and requests. She scrolls for a moment, then sets it down. No tears, no anger, just acceptance. She whispers softly to herself, "If I was not invited to the wedding, I am not invited to their finances either." It is not revenge. It is respect. The kind she had always given others now returned to herself. It is her small but powerful victory, a moment that marks the start of something new. She is no longer waiting to be remembered. She is choosing to remember herself. The knock on the door comes early in the morning. She already knows who it is. Her heart beats faster, but she does not rush. When she opens the door, her son stands there, face tense, eyes cold. Beside him, his wife holds her phone tightly, looking uncomfortable but ready for a fight. Her son walks in without waiting for permission. "Why would you embarrass me like this?" he says sharply. "You stopped the transfer, and now I have to explain to everyone why the money did not arrive." His voice carries frustration, but underneath it there is something else: guilt. She listens quietly, hands clasped in front of her, trying to stay calm. She says softly, "Embarrass you? I did what I needed to do for myself." But he shakes his head, not hearing her words. "You could have at least told me first," he says. "Do you have any idea how this makes us look?" His wife steps in then, pretending to soothe him. "Let us not argue," she says gently, turning toward the older woman with a small smile. "We all know you are alone. Maybe you just got confused about the payment. It happens at your age." The words hit harder than any shout could. They sound polite, but they sting. Her smile fades. "I am not confused," she replies. "I made a choice." The daughter-in-law glances at her husband, her expression shifting from fake concern to irritation. "We all have responsibilities," she says, her tone sharpening. "We have bills, a wedding to pay off, and now you want to create drama?" Her son joins in again, his voice rising. "You raised me better than this. You always said family helps each other. Why are you doing this now?" She feels something tighten in her chest, the familiar pull of guilt, the urge to apologize, to make things easier for him. But this time she stays still. Her voice is steady. "Family helps each other," she says. "But it cannot be one-sided forever. I have given all my life. Now I need peace." He looks shocked, as if he cannot recognize her anymore. The room feels tense, the air thick with everything unsaid. His wife crosses her arms. "So this is how it is going to be. You stop helping and we are supposed to just accept it." "Yes," she says simply. "You are adults now. You can handle your own lives." Her son sighs in disbelief. "You are choosing pride over family," he says bitterly. She meets his eyes. "No. I am choosing self-respect over dependence." That sentence hangs in the air. For a moment there is silence. Then anger takes over. Her son shakes his head, grabs his keys and turns toward the door. "Fine," he says. "Do whatever you want. But do not expect us to come back when things go wrong." His wife adds quickly, "We will see how long you can live alone with that attitude." As they step out, she follows them to the doorway. They are still arguing, their voices spilling into the street. But she stays calm. She looks at them one last time and says quietly, "Take care of yourselves." Then she closes the door and locks it. On the other side, their voices fade into the distance. Inside, the silence returns, heavy but peaceful. She leans against the door, eyes closed, breathing slowly. For the first time in years, she feels the weight lifting off her shoulders. The house may be empty, but her heart feels steady. She walks to the window and looks out at the morning light spreading across the street. Feels different now, clear, honest, and still. They left angry, but she knows this was the moment she truly stood up for herself. It hurts, but it also heals. And in that quiet, she understands that love without respect is not love at all. Weeks passed and the house grew quiet. The phone no longer rang and no one came by. At first, the silence felt heavy, like a reminder of everything she had lost. She would wake up expecting a message or a knock at the door, but there was nothing. Just stillness. In the beginning, she felt lonely. The quiet reminded her of the years when her son was young, running through the house calling her name. Those memories floated back often, catching her off guard. But over time, the sadness began to fade. The quiet started to feel different. It started to feel peaceful. She began writing again. Not letters or messages, but a small journal she kept on the kitchen table. Each morning she wrote down simple thoughts. What the weather was like, what she cooked, how she felt. Sometimes it was only a few lines, but it made her feel lighter, as if the words took away part of her loneliness. One afternoon she decided to tend to her garden. It had been months since she last touched the soil. Weeds had grown everywhere and some flowers were gone. She put on her gloves, rolled up her sleeves and started cleaning. As she worked, she felt something shift inside her. The earth under her hands, the smell of flowers, the soft wind, it all reminded her that life still moved forward, even when people did not. Soon she began visiting an old friend from her neighborhood. They had lost touch over the years, but when she called, her friend sounded happy to hear from her. They started meeting every week for tea, sharing stories, laughing about old times. It felt warm, familiar, and real. Days began to blend softly into weeks. There were no arguments, no expectations, no guilt. Just the rhythm of her own life returning. She cooked for herself, watched the sunset from her porch, and sometimes sat in silence without feeling alone. One evening, as she closed her journal and looked out the window, she realized something. The quiet she had feared so much had become her comfort. It was not emptiness anymore. It was peace. She smiled to herself and whispered, "Peace was the silence I did not know I needed." The morning began like any other. She brewed her tea, opened the mail, and sifted through the usual bills and advertisements. But one envelope stood out. It was thick, stamped with an official seal. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it, her eyes scanning the words that made her heart sink. Her son was challenging her will. The letter claimed she was mentally unstable and unfit to handle her own finances. For a moment she could not breathe. The room felt smaller. The edges of the paper blurred as tears filled her eyes. She sat down slowly, holding the letter like it might burn her fingers. The same son she had raised, supported, and sacrificed for was now questioning her sanity in writing. She read the lines again, hoping she had misunderstood. But the words were there, cold and official. Her son's name. His lawyer's signature. Legal terms that made her feel powerless. She whispered to herself, "What did I ever do to deserve this?" The panic came next. Thoughts rushed through her mind all at once. The house, her savings, the things she had worked her whole life for. Were they trying to take it all? Were they planning this the whole time? She tried calling her son, but he did not answer. The silence on the other end of the line felt like another betrayal. That evening, she decided she needed help. She searched for a local lawyer and made an appointment for the next day. Sitting across from the attorney in a quiet office, she felt nervous, almost embarrassed. When the lawyer asked what had happened, she took a deep breath and told her story from the beginning. She talked about how she helped her son after he lost his job. How she paid their rent, bought their groceries, and supported them through everything. She mentioned the wedding she was never invited to, and how she stopped sending money only after being treated like a stranger. Her voice shook at first, but as she spoke, she grew stronger. The lawyer listened carefully, taking notes, asking questions. When she finished, there was a moment of silence. Then the lawyer looked at her kindly and said, "You have nothing to be ashamed of. They are trying to manipulate you, but you have the truth on your side." The lawyer explained that she needed to protect herself. She should collect every receipt, bank statement, and message showing her financial support. She should change her locks, secure her documents, and make sure her assets were in her name alone. The lawyer also advised her to update her will with clear legal backing so no one could challenge it again. As she left the office, something inside her shifted. The fear was still there, but now it was mixed with determination. She had spent years giving without question, trusting without limits. Now she realized that love without boundaries can invite harm. That night, she sat at her kitchen table with all her papers spread before her. She labeled folders, sorted receipts, and highlighted important dates. Each action felt like reclaiming a piece of herself. She was no longer the quiet mother waiting for her son's approval. She was a woman protecting her life's work. When she was done, she leaned back in her chair and looked at the letter one last time. The accusations no longer frightened her. They fueled her. Her voice was calm when she said it aloud, like a promise to herself. They wanted control. They will get justice instead. The days after the lawyer's visit felt heavy but calmer. She followed every instruction, organized her papers, and changed the locks. Yet in the quiet moments, the loneliness crept back in. She began to wonder if she had made the right choice. Was she really protecting herself, or was she being too harsh? That question stayed in her mind until one afternoon, a knock came at her door. It was her neighbor, Mrs. Patel, holding a small box of sweets. She smiled warmly and said she had heard bits of what was going on. "I came to check on you," she said softly. For a moment, the woman hesitated, unsure if she wanted to talk. But something in Mrs. Patel's kind eyes made her open up. They sat at the kitchen table and she began to share the story. The surprise wedding, the phone call, the letter, all of it. Mrs. Patel listened quietly, nodding, her expression calm but understanding. When she finished, Mrs. Patel sighed and said, "You are not alone. My own daughter stopped talking to me for years after I stopped helping her financially. It hurt deeply, but I learned that love without respect only breaks you down." The words hit her harder than she expected. Someone else had lived through the same kind of pain. The isolation she felt started to lift. She was not weak and she was not crazy for finally standing her ground. Soon more neighbors and friends reached out. One brought over homemade soup. Another invited her to a small tea gathering. They talked about ordinary things, gardens, recipes, local news, but their warmth filled the space that had felt so empty before. These simple acts reminded her that kindness still existed, even if it did not come from the people she had given everything to. As the sun set one evening, she looked around the room at her friends, laughing softly. For the first time in a long while, she smiled without forcing it. The pain was still there, but it was no longer all she could feel. She realized she was surrounded by people who cared, not because of money or obligation, but because they truly valued her. That realization gave her strength. She took a deep breath and said quietly, almost to herself, "This time I am not fighting alone." The letter from the court said a social worker would visit to assess her mental state. She stared at the paper for a long time, her hands trembling slightly. It felt unreal. The boy she raised was now trying to prove that she was unstable. She could not understand how love could turn into something like this. But instead of crying again, she decided she would face it with strength. When the social worker arrived, she was polite, middle-aged, with a calm voice and kind eyes. She introduced herself, explained that she was here to ask some questions, and began her evaluation. The woman nodded and invited her in. Her home was tidy. The table was set for tea. The garden outside looked freshly watered. Everything around her quietly told the story of a woman who still cared for her life, even in chaos. The questions started simple. What was her daily routine? How did she manage her finances? Did she remember dates and names? She answered each one clearly, sometimes even smiling when talking about her morning walks or the flowers she was growing. When asked about her son, her voice softened. She said, "He is my only child. I love him. But love should not mean losing yourself." The social worker nodded, taking notes, occasionally looking up as if moved by her words. After an hour, she asked if she could speak with others in the neighborhood. The woman agreed. She had nothing to hide. The next few days, people around her home were approached for interviews. Neighbors spoke of her kindness. The store owner remembered how she always paid on time. A friend from the community center said she was one of the most thoughtful people she had ever met. Their words painted a very different picture from the one her son had described. At the same time, her son and daughter-in-law were giving their own statements. They spoke with confidence, but their tone was impatient, almost rehearsed. They claimed she was forgetful, unstable, and difficult to reason with. The investigator watched them carefully, noticing how their frustration often slipped through the polished answers. When asked for examples, their stories contradicted each other. Meanwhile, back at her house, the woman spent her days quietly. She cooked, cleaned, and wrote in her journal. The fear had not fully left her, but she felt something stronger now. A calm certainty that the truth would not need defending if it was real. When the social worker returned for a final visit, she smiled gently. She said she appreciated the honesty and cooperation. There was something steady in her eyes, like she already knew the truth. The woman thanked her and offered tea once again. As the door closed behind the investigator, she exhaled slowly. The tension had not disappeared, but the air felt lighter. She did not know what the final report would say, but deep inside she already sensed the outcome. Because sometimes, calmness itself is proof of strength. The courtroom was colder than she expected. The walls were pale, the lights bright enough to make her blink. She sat at the front beside her lawyer, her hands resting on the table, calm but steady. Her son and daughter-in-law sat across the room, whispering to each other. It felt strange to see them there, not as family but as people trying to take something from her. The judge entered and everyone stood. Her heart raced as the session began. The lawyer introduced her case clearly, describing how she had supported her son for years, how she had paid his rent, helped with groceries, and even redecorated his apartment to help him start a new life. He presented receipts, bank transfers, and messages that showed her role in keeping them stable. She listened quietly, each piece of evidence feeling like a small echo of her love being read aloud. Then it was their turn. Her son's lawyer stood and painted a different story. He said she had become unstable after her husband's death, that she was forgetful, difficult, and prone to emotional outbursts. He claimed she had cut them off financially out of bitterness, not self-respect. For a moment she felt her chest tighten. But she looked down, took a deep breath, and waited. She knew truth had its own voice. When it was her turn to speak, the room grew silent. Her lawyer asked simple questions about her life, her habits, her decisions. She answered each one clearly. When asked why she had stopped sending money, she said, "Because they excluded me from their wedding. It was not about punishment. It was about realizing I had become useful, not loved." The courtroom stayed quiet. Even the judge paused before noting something down. Then came the daughter-in-law's testimony. She spoke smoothly at first, describing the older woman as controlling and unpredictable. But when the lawyer cross-examined her, small cracks appeared. She was asked why they had hidden the wedding and she stumbled. She said it was private. Then she said it was rushed. Then she said it was the son's idea. Each answer contradicted the last. The lawyer pressed gently, asking about the photos online, the captions, the expensive venue. She looked down, unsure of what to say. Her son tried to defend her, but his voice shook. He said he only wanted peace. The lawyer asked why he had filed for control of her estate if that was true. He said it was for her protection. The lawyer pointed to the document where he had listed himself as sole beneficiary. The courtroom murmured softly. The judge raised a hand, restoring silence. Finally, her lawyer brought forward a small collection of letters and emails she had written over the years. Birthday cards, notes, and receipts for tuition and groceries. They were not dramatic, but they told a quiet story of love, patience, and sacrifice. One message read, "I know things are hard, but you will get through this. I believe in you." The lawyer paused and said, "This is not the voice of a woman who has lost her mind. This is the voice of a mother who has given too much." As the closing arguments ended, the judge leaned back in his chair. The room felt heavy with silence. The son avoided her eyes. The daughter-in-law stared at her lap. After several long moments, the judge began to speak. He acknowledged the evidence, the contradictions, and the testimony from neighbors who had described her as kind, responsible, and generous. He said there was no sign of mental instability, only a clear pattern of emotional and financial manipulation against her. Then he gave the final ruling. Her estate would remain fully under her control. All allegations against her were dismissed. Her son and his wife were ordered to withdraw their claims immediately. The sound of the gavel echoed sharply. She closed her eyes, not in triumph but in quiet relief. The weight she had carried for months began to lift. She stood up slowly, her lawyer giving her a reassuring nod. Across the room, her son's face was pale. He looked like a child again, lost and uncertain. As she walked out of the courtroom, the sun outside felt warmer than she remembered. Her friend was waiting by the steps, smiling softly. She said, You did it. The woman nodded, tears finally gathering in her eyes. She replied, No. I just stopped letting them take what was never theirs. That day justice did not feel loud. It felt peaceful, like a long exhale after years of holding her breath. And for the first time in a long while she knew she could live without fear, because the truth had spoken for her. After the court victory, she went home and stood in her quiet living room for a long time. The same walls that once echoed with arguments and tension now felt calm. She looked around and realized she did not belong there anymore. The house had become a reminder of everything she had endured. So she decided to let it go. Within a few weeks she sold the house. She packed her memories carefully, keeping only what truly mattered. When the sale was finalized, she donated a portion of the money to a local charity that helped single mothers. She said it felt right. For years she had given without choice, but now she was giving by her own will. That small difference meant everything. She moved to a smaller town near the coast, where mornings were quiet and the air smelled of salt. Her new home was modest but bright, filled with sunlight that poured through wide windows. She bought a few plants, painted the kitchen a soft yellow, and placed her favorite photograph on the shelf. It was a picture of her and her husband smiling on their anniversary. Looking at it made her feel at peace instead of sad. At first she did not know what to do with all the free time. She had spent so many years caring for others that she forgot how to care for herself. One day she passed a small art center near the market. Inside, people were laughing and painting together. Something inside her stirred. The next week she joined their beginner class. Her hands shook at first, but with each stroke the colors began to calm her. Painting became her therapy. She started meeting new people, sharing stories, and attending local community events. She began to laugh more. Neighbors invited her for tea and she found herself saying yes. Every day she learned something new about living without fear. It was not about starting over. It was about starting right. Months passed and one evening she sat on her porch, watching the sunset fade into the ocean. She thought about her son and his wife. There was no anger left in her, only acceptance. She had loved them deeply and maybe one day they would understand what they had lost. But that was no longer her burden to carry. Her lawyer once told her that justice gives you closure, but peace is something you give yourself. Now she finally understood. She smiled softly and whispered to herself, They may have taken my trust, but they did not take my future. She sat quietly near her window, watching the evening light fade across the sky. The air outside was calm and for the first time in years her heart felt the same. So much had changed, yet in that silence she felt whole again. She had lost people she once thought she could never live without, but what she gained was something far more precious: peace. She thought about the long road that brought her here. The tears, the anger, the confusion, all of it had shaped her into someone stronger. She had learned that love without respect is not love at all. It is control disguised as care. And when you finally walk away from that kind of love, you do not lose yourself. You find yourself again. Sometimes losing people is not a tragedy. It is freedom. It is the moment life gives you a second chance to stand tall and choose yourself without guilt. She realized that real love should never make you small, silent, or scared. It should make you feel safe, valued, and respected. That lesson had cost her deeply, but it was worth every step. She looked around her home, filled with colors she had painted, laughter she had earned, and peace she had built with her own hands. Her story was no longer about betrayal or pain. It was about renewal. About how strength can rise quietly even after heartbreak. And as her story comes to an end, here is what she would say if she could speak to every mother watching. Never let love blind you to respect. You deserve kindness. You deserve peace. And you deserve to live without fear. If you believe every mother deserves respect, hit the subscribe button and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes a story like this can remind someone that it is never too late to start again.